Also need to introduce my colleague Jude Davis, who again we're extremely grateful to Jude. Jude is one of our support teachers for additional, sorry, there you go, you're weaving there. So support teacher for specific learning differences was what I was trying to say. Our colleague Louise Amos. So Jude Jude and Kerry will do a kind of double act throughout this session, talking about how the digital tools can be used and how they'll specifically support pupils with reading. And we are placing an emphasis on reading for research today. So Jude, was there anything else that you wanted to say at this point? Or will I play on with my slides?
No, I can't see anybody, so I'm just sitting with my video off because it's really quite disconcerting knowing that there are faces out there that I can't see. So no, absolutely, we're talking all about reading, and my bit today is really about why children have some challenges with reading.
Thanks so much, Jude. As I say, we're very grateful to both of you, and it's wonderful to work with colleagues right across the whole of our Forth Valley, West Lothian RIC. So, I'm Yvonne McLean, didn't introduce myself. So I'm Yvonne McLean, I'm an Education Support Officer with responsibility for literacy. So I'm a member of our literacy team here in Falkirk Children's Services. And it's my job here just to use a few slides at the beginning to set the scene for these sessions. So if you've been to some of our other digital learning literacy sessions, you'll know that I've used this OECD compass slide quite a bit, just to position the work that we're doing this afternoon in the big international picture of education. So the vision for 2030 for education systems all over the world is captured in this compass. And some of the key ideas is that we, as practitioners, would have agency and autonomy, so a sense of control over the way that we do our work. But even more importantly, that our pupils, our children and young people that we work with will be equipped to have that sense of control and maybe even independence in their learning process. So all of these digital learning sessions, which we've instigated 2 or 3 years ago in Falkirk, are designed to help you as practitioners, to help your children and young people be as independent as possible in their own learning processes, and particularly in their development of literacy and literacy across the curriculum. So that's the big vision. So we use this strap line that these sessions are vital to some, but valuable to all. That's the way we see them. And in the next slide, I've made a wee reference to the What Scotland Learned Building Back Better paper there. And you'll see that they specifically spoke about how technology and digital tools in particular could and should have a really big role in that, enabling our pupils to be independent, agentic individuals in their own learning process. So that's setting the scene for how these tools can help our children and young people reach their full potential. And in the next slide, I've picked out a bit of our Falkirk progression pathway. Don't know if, obviously that won't be relevant to those of you who are in different authorities, but you, I know, possibly have something very, very similar. So you'll see that we are sitting today or focusing today in the reading organiser. And a lot of the tools that we're going to speak with you today, we're going to focus in on how they can help your children to develop their ability to find and use information in reading. So we've homed in the slide on literacy as just a second level one, but obviously at the 0-14A and first level 1-14A, it would be just as applicable, and obviously on into third and fourth levels as well. So that's the element of literacy and of reading, specific elements of reading that we'll be looking at. But we need to be aware that in the next slide, if you in your authority also have technologies progression pathways, then you could think of the work we're doing today and the things that you maybe do with the digital tools, which Kerry will share with you. You might be thinking of those as very simple classroom level interdisciplinary experiences, because you will be looking at those experiences and outcomes in digital literacy and the organiser from technologies, and possibly in processing and managing information responsibly would be one of the elements that you'll be exploring with your children. So you can think of it as making explicit links between children's literacy and technology skills. So that might be of some interest to you. And in the next slide, I've captured that as a wee formula. I quite like the idea of LIT plus TCH plus something else would or could equal quite simple, quite real life, interdisciplinary learning in your classroom. So maybe some of the tools that Kerry shows you this afternoon, or some of the suggestions that Jude make, will give you ideas for some artwork, some social studies, or some science that you might be doing over the next few days or weeks. So the examples that I've put in the slide, so the replacement for that question mark, could be literacy plus technologies, digital literacy, plus art and design E's and O's. Could be that you're enabling your pupils to develop their reading for research in relation to some religious images related to the season that we're in just now, or for a specific design or expressive practical project. So it could be that you want your pupils to read for information around that. It could be that after the Christmas break, you're going to be focusing in on social studies. You're maybe going to be looking at a particular element of local history, or you want to do some map analysis work, or to enable your pupils to read and draw conclusions from statistical charts or tables in modern studies or in business studies. Or maybe you are going to be doing that, I've just forgotten the proper name for the organiser, but you'll all be sitting there screaming at me, science in context, where you look at the impact of science on society. So it could be that you might want to home in on some of the ethical or societal issues relating to sciences. So these are just some examples of how you could contextualise the reading for research, and you could think of it as planning in your interdisciplinary learning in a very small scale, classroom-based way. So I hope that sort of sets the scene for all the brilliant tools that Kerry's going to share with you, and all of the great information that Jude is going to share as well, just in terms of thinking about how you might use and apply the content of today's session. So I'll hand over to you, Kerry, to speak a bit more about the tools that you're going to focus on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm just going to stop the slides for a moment and reshare them, because I think there's someone's having a wee issue seeing them. So hopefully that will re-kick your system into place. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Kerry Abercrombie. I'm the Curriculum Development Officer for Digital Learning here at Falkirk Council, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you today, and of course to colleagues from across the RIC. Now, as Yvonne said at the start, and you might not have heard because you might not have been here, this is all very much iPad based, because that's the device that we predominantly use in Falkirk. All of the tools today are based on iPad. So as Yvonne's already said, if you don't have iPads at all, if it's not something that you use in your daily sort of classroom teaching and you don't have access to them, we totally understand if you decide that this session isn't for you and you want to pop off. That's absolutely fine. Now, I will say that, Yvonne, I can't see the chat, so you're going to have to keep me up to date of anything that's in the chat. But let's get going with this. So here is what we would like you to be able to do by the end of today's session. So we would like you to be able to identify how specific digital tools can support independent reading for understanding. We would like for you to be able to give examples of how such tools can enrich the teaching of reading and research skills. For you to be able to plan how to use digital tools to enable learners to read and understand a range of texts for research purposes across the curriculum. As Yvonne said, there is a bit of a research focus here, but hopefully that will also include other types of reading as well, not just reading for research. And then finally, to see how specific digital tools can support pupil progression of reading skills. So how are we actually going to do that? Well, firstly, we're going to look at what digital tools are available to help our learners access and engage with text-based research materials. Secondly, we'll look at recording research information and how the digital tools and features can assist with this. Then we'll look at and we'll hear experiences of pupils with their learners. And finally, we'll have a bit of time, hopefully, for reflection on what we've seen today. And I've actually put in at the end a couple of additional tools that we didn't show you in the last version of this session last year that hopefully you will find useful. So we're going to get started then with getting the iPad ready. Now, on all iPads in the settings, there are a number of built-in features which make things easier for users in a range of scenarios. In particular, for reading purposes, we would probably be thinking about things like spoken content function and colour filters. So this is Macy, and Macy would like to give her iPad the ability to speak things out to her. She doesn't mind reading, she's happy to read, but sometimes she finds words a little tricky, and it's easier for her to be able to hear things read to her sometimes rather than read them for herself. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start by going into the settings and look at some of the features that might help Macy when it comes to reading. And some of you, if you were on our last session, will have seen this before. We've talked about spoken content. It's something that I think should be switched on all iPads, like from the get-go, the moment you take it out of the box. But unfortunately it's not. So we do have to know where these tools are and how we switch them on. So I'm going to come off of the presentation and I'm just going to go into settings on my iPad. And on the left, I'm just going to scroll down until I see that accessibility menu, and I'm going to tap on it, and I'm going to get all of these choices. And I'm going to focus in the first box where it says spoken content. If I tap on that, I'm going to get a whole load of options that I can turn on, turn off, etc., etc. And I'm going to make sure that that very first button, speak selection, is toggled to green. Now, this is something that I would get every child that's using an iPad to switch on tomorrow if I had them in front of me, because it's really, really useful. You can see we've got other options like speak screen, which will read the whole screen. We also have the speech controller. We have highlighting content, so we can choose whether it's going to highlight words, sentences, or words and sentences. I can choose whether it's going to underline or whether it's going to put a little background colour on it. And I can choose which colours are going to be used. I can also turn on and off different voices, and I can change the speaking rate of the voice that is going to read back to me in this part of the menu. Now, what that does, as many of you will know, is it means that if I go into Safari, I can tap on a word and it will highlight it. And in this menu that pops up above where I've highlighted the word, I now have the option of speak. And if I tap on speak, you will, did you hear anything? I don't think you did, because I don't know if I've got my audio on. Hang on a wee second. I don't think it's actually going to play the game, but what that would have done is it would have spoken that word out loud to us. And I can use the little blue dots on each side just to drag that to more or less of the word that the paragraph or sentence that I want. Now that little speak button is only going to be there if I have turned on spoken content, in particular speak selection. But that's going to be really useful for Macy if she comes across some of those words that she doesn't quite know. And she can have them read out to her, and she'll be able to make use of that functionality. Now, another thing that I can do in here as well is if I highlight the word, I've also got the option to look the word up. So sometimes, I'm sure we all know this, when you're reading, you'll come across a word that you've got no idea what it means. And that little look up button is just going to bring up a dictionary definition of what we mean by that word. So if I tap on the dictionary definition, you'll see that it's telling me that a self-portrait is a portrait that an artist produces of themselves. And that's super useful as a built-in feature, because it means that we're not opening a new tab to go and find a dictionary website, to go and find the meaning of the word. It's all built in right there for us. And we don't have to get lost in multiple different tabs, etc., etc. And when I'm done, I just tap anywhere on the screen and that's going to disappear. So really, really useful to know that there's lots of things in that little menu that pops up when you've highlighted a word that are useful for helping our readers. Now, another thing that Macy might want to do is that she might want to turn on the colour filters. So I'm sure we've all got experience from our own schooling, or perhaps earlier on in our careers, where we used to have the coloured overlays that we put on top of textbooks, jotters, etc., to make it easier for some learners to be able to read. And that's something that's built in to our iPads. So I'm going to go back to the home screen and I'm just going to go back into settings. And this time in accessibility, I am going to go to, now this is where I always get lost. So I'm going to go into display and text size. And you'll see that I've got lots of options, which might actually be useful for some of our readers. I can bold the text, I can choose larger text sizes, if it's the vision part of reading that's sort of difficult for me. But way down in the bottom of this display and text size menu, I have the color filters option. You can see it third from the bottom there. And at the moment it's switched off. So if I go into this, and you'll know you're in the right place because you'll have all these lovely colored pencils. I'm going to tap on colored filters and I'm going to make sure that it's color tint that is selected in this list of different things. And you won't see any difference on my screen, which we'll come to in a minute. But at the bottom, I have different intensity markers and hue markers, so I can change the intensity and I can change the color. And you're not seeing anything, but if I stand up here and turn my iPad round, you will see that my iPad is currently showing a bright pink filter. So that's a filter that is applied only to the child's device. So if they are, like I am, sharing their screen to deliver a presentation, say, or for any other reason, the colour filter is not going to show up on the screen. It's also not going to show up if they record something. It's something that's applied across essentially across the top of the device. It doesn't show in any recordings. It doesn't show in any mirroring to projectors or to Apple TVs. And I think that's quite good, and I'm sure Jude will agree when she comes on in a minute to talk about it, that it's that whole piece around making people feel like the tools that they're using are not othering them. It's not making them stand out as someone who is different. That colour filter is something that children we know do need, but lots of children may not in the past have maybe used them because it creates a visual difference between them and others in the class. So that is setting the iPad up. I'm just going to turn off my colour filters because I don't want mine on there just now. So that's a couple of things for setting the iPad up, making sure we've got Speak Select turned on, making sure that if we need colour filters, we know how to access them for reading. I'll just go back into the presentation now, and as we move on, you'll see that we are moving into researching online or reading online. So Macy and her class have been given the task to research a famous artist, and they've been allowed to choose which artist they would like to look at. Now, Macy has heard of an artist called Frida Kahlo. She had a book at home that Mum used to read to her at bedtime, so she's decided that this is going to be the artist that she is going to research. Now, Macy's teacher has given her a research scaffolding sheet, so she knows what type of information she's looking to find, and her first thought is, I'm going to go online and look for information. That is often many of the children who have devices' first thought is to go online. So Macy's class have iPads, and she's going to use Safari, which is the built-in web browser on iPads, to find this information. Let's take a look at what Safari can do for Macy that might be helpful in her research process. So if I go out of here and into Safari, you can see that I've already Googled Frida Kahlo. You could probably have seen where that was going when I first started and tried to show you Speak Select. So we've Googled Frida Kahlo and we've got a range of different websites. And if I just choose one here, let's choose this one, fridakahlo.org. You can see that it takes us to a website, as we would expect. Now, this website, I think, is quite difficult to read. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pictures, and there's sort of 3 columns on this site, and really it's just the middle column that we're looking for. We've also got a bunch of adverts and stuff that are coming up that might be a little bit distracting if I'm trying to read for information. So one thing that I can do really quickly and really easily on Safari is put it into reader view. So on the very top, next to where it says the website address on the left, there's 2 little A's. And if I tap on that, you'll see that I get the choice to do multiple different things, but I am going to choose show reader, and look how quickly we strip away all of that distracting stuff, all of that stuff that we don't want and we don't need, and we can just get down to the information that we are looking for. And it keeps relevant photographs or relevant videos in there, but it really is just making the reading experience so much more streamlined, particularly for our children who find, you know, a lot of stuff on the screen is quite distracting. To turn it off, I just have to tap on the AA again, and I'm just going to do the exact same as I did before, except this time I'm going to hide reader rather than show reader. And the website will go back to exactly what it was before. Now, I do have another website open here, which is Google Arts and Culture. And by the way, if you're ever doing artist research, Google Arts and Culture is amazing. But part of the problem with this website is that you'll see if I go to the AA at the top, my show reader is grayed out. So because this website doesn't have enough text on it, it's not going to allow me to change it into a reader view website. And I think that's quite an interesting thing to know, that only websites with a certain percentage of text will convert into reader view. And the reason I'm saying I think it's quite interesting is because if I'm asking someone to research and there's not actually a lot of text on the website, how valuable is that site going to be in my research? So just being aware that reader view is there and it is easy to switch on and off, but that it doesn't always work, and that when it doesn't work because there's not enough text on the website. Now, this one, and I've got a fellow English teacher in the audience today. I saw her name come up in the list of people that are coming in, and this, for people who have to teach topics where you're maybe trying to save a lot of articles or a lot of websites, this one is a game changer. So I've got a lot of websites open here, and I perhaps want to save these 4 websites in a way that allows me to access them again really quickly. In the top left-hand corner, just underneath the time, there's a little sort of rectangular icon. And if I tap on that, it's going to give me lots of information about, like, this is how many tabs you've got open, this is your bookmarks, this is your reading list. And I will show you how to bookmark in a minute, but that's not what I want to do. I don't want to bookmark just one website. I want to save all of these websites so that they'll open whenever I want to. So I'm going to tap on the little plus that is just on the right-hand side of the left-hand pane, the right-hand side of the left-hand pane. It's a little icon that's like 2 squares, one in front of the other, with a plus in the middle. And when I do that, I can either empty all these tabs out, so get rid of them all, or I can make a new tab group. And if I tap on new tab group, it's going to ask me what I want it to be called. So I'm going to call it Artist Research. And when I tap on save, you'll see that it's added it to the left-hand side. So I've actually already got a group of tabs open called Uni, and that will open all my Uni tabs. But my Artist Research tab group is going to open all of those websites that I already had open at that time. So I think that's super useful if you are looking across a range of different websites. Maybe you've got a list of different articles that you want to access quickly and get them all back up on the screen with one tap, rather than going and finding each one over and over again. So that's called tab grouping. Now, you can see that in my Safari options on the left, I do have bookmarks. I've got favourites, and I have a reading list, and I have my history. Now, let's say that this Google Arts and Culture page was one that I wanted to save to my bookmarks. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to press on the share button, which is the rectangle with the arrow that points right up the way. It's up there in the top right-hand corner. And if I tap on that, I get the option to do loads of different things. So I can email it to somebody, I can airdrop this tab to somebody, I can put it into notes, etc., etc. But you'll see there that I also have the choice to add it to my reading list. I can add it as a bookmark, or I can add it to favourites. So I'm just going to add it as a bookmark just now. And you'll see that I get the choice to rename it. I can get the choice to choose a location for it. I'm just going to tap on save. And when I go back in to my Safari options and I go to bookmarks, in favourites, that Frida Kahlo Google Arts and Culture website is there. So particularly useful for maybe older children who are, I'm thinking specifically about Nat 5 persuasive writing or discursive writing. when they're looking at lots of different articles and they're trying to bring them all together, and they need to be able to access those articles again. Rather than keeping a bibliography on paper or on a Google Doc or whatever, they can just make either a tab group or a list of bookmarks that are related specifically to what it is that they are looking for, or looking at rather than looking for. So lots of things that you can do in Safari to help with reading, as we've seen, bearing in mind that Safari is the default browser for iPad. It's been specifically designed for iPad. It makes sense that it has all of these things built into it. And to me, browsing on my iPad, it's the first thing that I go to. It's helpful, it's easy, and it's productive. So let's have a look then at researching with physical texts, or reading with physical texts. So there would be many reasons, of course, to use physical texts. Some people, though, however, might need a little bit of support with reading, as we've talked about. That's what we're here to speak about. And for this, I find that the best mix of apps is using OneNote and then using Microsoft Lens to convert pictures or images that you've taken into digital text. So I have this book here. It's the book that Macy's mum was reading to her at night time, and it has a lovely page, beautiful page actually, on Frida Kahlo. But it might be that we need to digitize this quickly so that Macy can get a little bit of help in reading it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to my home screen and I'm going to look for Microsoft Lens. Now, I can't see the comments, so I don't know if anyone's made this comment, but there has been known issues with Microsoft Lens, but this method 100% does work, I promise you. So we are going to go into Microsoft Lens and it's going to open up our camera. And if I just get this here and I hover over the Frida Kahlo page, I can take a picture and it's going to automatically identify where the writing is. And you can see that when I move onto the next slide, the next screen, it asks me if I want to do certain things to it, do I want to write on it, etc., etc. What I obviously want to do is I want to rotate it, so I can just rotate it so it's the right way around. And I'm going to tap on Done. Now what's coming up is it's asking me where I want to export this to. And as I've said, the best combination is Lens and OneNote. So if I tap on OneNote, you can see that I have the choice of choosing a location, and I've actually got a OneNote notebook that's specifically for immersive reader. And you can see I've actually already got a section in it called Frida Kahlo Research. So I'm going to save that file into my Frida Kahlo Research folder in my OneNote. And what it's doing just now is just processing it, as you can see, and it's now finished and it's ready to go. So if I tap on that now, what will happen is it is going to open up the section of the book and it's going to have my picture in it. Now, obviously, just taking a picture of a page isn't helpful. The reason that I have put this into OneNote is because when I am in OneNote, if I tap on View at the top, I then get the option of Immersive Reader, which is just underneath where it says Insert and Draw. You can see the Immersive Reader icon. And if I tap on that, what will happen is this will no longer be a picture. It will be the text extracted from the picture. So hopefully you've maybe seen Immersive Reader before. You can see I've got lots of things already switched on. I'm just actually going to go off and switch off all of these labels and syllables, etc., and show you what this does. So you can see it's not really picked up the word painter very well, but it's telling us that once upon a time in a bright blue house near Mexico City, etc., etc., etc. Now you won't hear this because the sound is being used for the call. But if I tap on play, what it would be doing is it would be reading the whole text to the child. And in this little speaker icon to the right of the play button, I could change the speed, I can change the voice to male or female, etc., etc. So they've got quite a lot of control of how something is read back to them. Now, that's not something that she could have done with the physical book alone, but actually look how really quite quickly you're able to support Macy with reading a physical text using a digital tool that's already available to her and hopefully already on her iPad. Now, there's other things that we can do in here that support reading. So in the AA, you can see that I can change the text size. If again, it's the writing size that's a problem for her in reading, I can increase or decrease the spacing between words to make it easier to read. If the font is the problem, I can change it to something that's perhaps a little bit more easier for her to read. And I can also change the colours in the background, etc. as well, just so that we've got lots of different choices for us. In the little 3 lines and the magic wand, we do have something that we showed last time in the writing session. We do have the ability to turn on different parts of speech. Again, I do think that's more of a writing tool than it is a reading tool, but just good to know that it's there. And we can turn on or turn off the labels for adverbs, adjectives, verbs, nouns, etc. In the final option on the top right, we have the little book, and you can see that we can change the line focus. So I can change it so that it goes one line of text at a time as it's reading. It can show 3 lines or it can show 5 lines. So if I just change that to 1 line at a time, you'll see that what it does is it kind of creates a bit of a shadow around the line, and when it is reading it back to Macy, it's just going to do it a line at a time so she can focus on just those words on the line, if that's going to be helpful. If I change it to 3 lines, that shadow just decreases a bit and we see more of the actual writing. So that's something that is good to know that it's there. The other thing that I think is good to know that is there is the picture dictionary. I think particularly for reading this is helpful. So when it's turned on, anytime that I tap on a word that has a picture that goes with it, we get that picture dictionary that comes up and it just dual codes some of those words for us. So quite clearly, if I couldn't read the word stop, or if I was having trouble reading the word stop, these pictures would clearly tell me that that word is saying stop. Now, it doesn't work for every single word. It only works for words that it has, like it's not going to have polio, I wouldn't have thought yet. But it has a lot of the words, if not necessarily all of them. So it's useful to know that that is there. Now, the other thing that we get in the little book is something at the bottom called Reading Coach. And I'm going to come back to that at the very, very, very end. So that's something that we're going to come back to. I'm not going to deal with that at the moment. But that is Immersive Reader. And as we've said before on other sessions, and as I'll say again on this session, the best version of Immersive Reader is in OneNote. So on your iPad, you do get it in other places. You get it in Word. You can sometimes get it in Edge browser. But by and large, OneNote is the way to go. And if you do have children who are struggling and need a little bit of help with Immersive Reader, them having their own Immersive Reader notebook so that they can just bring information in and have that support to read it is absolutely fine. That's certainly what I would do, and it's certainly, as you can see, what I've done as an example here. So rather than it coming in and messing up maybe all of the information in my master's folder or in some of the other folders that I've got a specific notebook that's just for Immersive Reader, and I can just put all my stuff in there and very quickly and easily have things that are physical, photographed in Lens, brought into OneNote and read out to me if that's something that I need. So that is researching with physical texts. We'll move on then to recording research. So there are many, many, many reasons to use physical worksheets and jotters, but it's so easy to make digital worksheets, which can make the recording of information when you're reading for information much, much easier. You're already probably making a worksheet anyway, and you're going to print it out. If you have access to one-to-one devices, there is no need to wait in that printer queue in the morning. You can make your worksheets digitally and send them to the children to fill out, and they can send them back to you either by uploading them to Teams or somewhere else, Google Classroom, or they can airdrop them back to you. Now, that's a workflow that probably needs a bit of practice, and you probably need to have a sort of plan in place. But just recently, I was actually speaking with a teacher from, I think it was St. Joseph's, who was actually using shared devices in her class. And she had a child who needed the support of digital tools. And they've managed to get a little workflow on the go where the child writes and types up in notes and then airdrops them to the teacher. The teacher takes a screenshot and puts it into a digital jotter that she has for that child. So it is possible to have a workflow that is supportive of our children who have maybe specific barriers to learning, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single person needs to have their own device. However, back to making the whole worksheet thing. So one of the things that I like to do, or the apps that I like to use to make a digital worksheet, is Keynote. Now, lots of people think that Keynote is just PowerPoint, but actually Keynote does a whole lot more. And what I'll do is I'll just go into Keynote just now and show you how easy it actually is for you to make a worksheet and for the children to be able to fill it in. So in Keynote, you can see here that I have a blank presentation 51. I've not named it yet. I'll actually just go in and do that just now, just by tapping on it and renaming it Artist Research. And you can see that I have a worksheet already in. And what that actually is, if I tap on it, is it's just a screenshot of a worksheet that I had already made previously. I'd actually made this in Canva. If I just delete this, you'll see how easy it is for me to make this. So I've already made the worksheet. I've taken a screenshot of it. It's now in my camera roll. I can press the media icon at the top, which is the little photograph, and I can choose a photo or video, and it's going to open up all of my photos, and I'll just choose the image that is my worksheet, and it puts it straight in there really quickly and really easily. Now, the benefit of it being a screenshot that I've put in is that this is just one item, and I can actually tap on the paintbrush, and if I tap on arrange, I can lock that so that the child can't move it. You can't see, but I'm moving my finger. I can't move it. It's locked to the background so that it can't be moved by the child. I'll just go in and lock this one as well. And that means that whatever they're doing, they're going to do this over the top. So there's lots of different ways that they can add to this. So in that little media tab that I was in before, the little picture at the top, and if you're on your iPad just now and you're thinking, I don't have that little picture, you might be on an older version of Keynote, in which case, if you just on the top right-hand corner tap the plus, you'll get all of these options. You can see that I can add in photos or videos. I can also record audio, I can put in drawings, etc., etc. So let's say I wanted to fill this in by hand. I tap on add drawing. I get a bunch of different tools that come up. I can use my finger to pinch to get closer, and I can just write in Frida, and that's actually quite thick. So I'm just going to tap on the pen again and get a little thinner one. And I can write over the top if I want to, if I've got a stylus, or if I just want to use my finger. I can also add in text, obviously. Text, it's not obvious where it is, so it's actually in shapes. So if I tap on the little shape button at the top, the little circle with the square, my very first choice is text. I can tap on that. I can move it to wherever I want it to be, double tap, keyboard will come up, and I can add in my text. Now, if you were at the last session about writing, you'll know all about dictation, which is the little microphone at the bottom left-hand side of the space bar. So if I'm not a good typer or a good writer, but I still have to fill in this information sheet, I can be using dictation here rather than typing. And that's there, and I can move it to wherever I need it to be. And if I want to delete anything, I can just tap on it and delete it. So I'll get rid of my handwriting and I'll pop my chosen artist into there. Now, another thing that it can do is I can transfer information straight into here from the internet. And let's not get caught up in a big debate about copy and paste, because I know obviously what you don't want children to do is just move information as it is straight over onto the worksheet. But if I wanted to move over, say, a painting of Frida Kahlo, I can just move something straight from Safari into Keynote. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can see, but at the very, very top of my screen, there's 3 little grey dots. If I tap on those, I'm going to get the option to split my screen, or I can choose the option to slide over. I'm going to choose split view. And what you'll see is my Keynote jumps up and off to the side, and I can pick another app that I want to open. So I'm going to choose Safari. And you can see here now we're in split screen mode, and I still have the full functionality on both sides of the split screen. But what I can do here is I can just tap and drag over things from one side to the other and insert them into my research. I can also do it with, again, not getting into the copy and paste debate just now, but I could, if I wanted to, move that writing over as well. So really simple and really easy for children to fill in these digital worksheets if you're doing it within the native apps. So the native apps being Keynote or Pages would also do the same thing. So as I said, it's worth thinking about digital worksheets. They don't take long to make. You probably already have a lot of worksheets that you can take a screenshot of. You don't have to print them. The only real difference, apart from obviously the enhanced ability to use digital tools to support reading and writing, is the logistics of handing them out. So you might want to, as I've said, airdrop the digital worksheet to children. So if I just come out of split view, in fact, I'll just go back into split view for a minute and show you how I did that. So I was in split view, and in the middle between the two screens, you can see a little grey line. If I just put my finger on that, you can see that I can choose to make one side bigger than the other. Or if I drag this all the way along to the right, it's going to get rid of that other split screen, and it's just going to leave me in Keynote. So sharing, really easy. I can just go into my name of my presentation. I can tap on not export. I can tap on share, which is just, give me a second. Seem to have lost it. Share, which is just next to the title of the presentation. It's the little, again, rectangle with the arrow that points straight up. And I can send a copy. Make sure you're not on collaborate. Make sure you're on send a copy. And I can airdrop that to anyone that's nearby that's got their airdrop switched on. But I can also, as you can see, put it into Teams. If I had Google Classroom on here, I could put it into Google Classroom. And it's just going to create a link which they then click, and they'll get a copy of the presentation. They will download their own copy. That's really important. So they'll download their own copy and they can write on it, and nobody else's writing is going to appear because it's not collaborative. They can get on with their work, and then they can hand it back in. Now, handing it back in, totally up to you. They can either do the same thing and share it back the way, or what they could do is they could simply go into full screen mode and screenshot it. And I was just swiping up from the bottom left-hand corner there. Screenshot it. It's then an image. They can upload that to their Teams or to their Google Classroom. I'll just delete that just now. So hopefully you'll find that useful. One thing that I've found with digital worksheets using them myself was that it just meant that we could all be much more creative when it came to presenting our research, because we could do much more in terms of things like putting in voice recordings, putting in drawings, putting in text, putting in photographs, etc., etc. I've not had to spend lots of money on reams of paper or coloured pencils or different types of tissue paper, etc., etc., for making big posters or whatever. And ultimately, the main thing was, I think my desk was much tidier at the end of the day, because when they started to make their product, inevitably they would end up with lots of different pieces of paper that were always getting lost or getting trampled on or getting left in a box somewhere. And it was much easier to keep everything neat and tidy. So I'm going to pause there. I feel like I've just spoke for absolutely ages. I'm going to pause there for a minute. I'm going to hand over to Jude, who's going to talk a little bit more about the impact and experiences that people have had using these kinds of tools to help support research when reading. Jude.
Thank you. My job, I have a great job. I get to go in and visit children who are having challenges with literacy for a number of reasons. And actually what I'm going to do is provide a wee bit of background to why children have these challenges with reading. What I would also say is that for me, using technology allows children to access text that they wouldn't be able to access age appropriate, which is really important for their self-esteem. And it also gives them a chance to record their ideas, their opinions, and share that in an appropriate manner with their peers, which for me is such an important thing when children are having challenges with literacy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some of the general challenges that can affect literacy. We'll look a wee bit more about some of the more specific challenges, and then we'll look at how we approach reading within Falkirk Council, because that all fits into the children who are struggling and why this is so important for these children. So we want to use these tools as a way of improving the quality and quantity of pupils' work, but we also need to understand why pupils have difficulty with reading. Some possible reasons for the difficulties in reading include, but are not limited to, the following. So often when I go in, I am being asked to assess children for dyslexia. It is the most common additional support need that we will have in our schools, and almost 10% of the population are dyslexic, which is going to equate to a couple of pupils in every class. If you're sitting thinking, I've not found them yet, don't panic. Children are really good at masking some of these challenges that they're having. For some children, it's a developmental delay and or a maturity. So we have children who have delays in some or all aspects of their learning and haven't made the same progress throughout their early years as their peers. Some children come into school, perhaps with a late birthday, who are just not ready to engage in learning in a classroom setting. And often these are the wee ones that you wish had had an extra year in nursery just to mature that wee bit more. For some children, there may be a specific condition such as ASD, ADHD, or DCD, and there'll be characteristics of these conditions which impact on a pupil's progress in literacy. One of the biggest factors is obviously the lack of focus and not being able to transfer skills across the curriculum. With speech and language, the pupil may have expressive or receptive language disorders, or they may have an articulation difficulty which can impact on literacy. I met a wee boy recently who was waiting for his 2 front teeth to grow in because he couldn't say a lot of the sounds, and that was impacting on his spelling and his reading. And if you have a child with autism in your class, you may notice that their expressive language is far better than the receptive language. If they've got something they want to tell you, they are certainly going to get their message across. For children, EL, changes in script and differing pronunciation of sounds can be a challenge. The hard thing to differentiate between is whether the challenge is with the EL or if the challenge is still there within their first language. For some children, we can have gaps in learning. So if pupils have missed considerable amounts of schooling for various reasons, their progress in literacy may be affected. We see that a lot with children who have had high absence rates. COVID obviously had a huge impact. And for Louise and I, we're still trying to work through the children who have got a specific literacy difference and those who just have huge gaps in their learning. One thing to bear in mind, if you have a child whose parents do have dyslexia, it often does run in the family. So they might actually be coming from a home environment that can also impact on their acquisition of literacy. Teaching, we have quite prescriptive Resources in certain places within literacy, so various aspects of teaching may have impacted on a child's progress. It may be that the pace of the phonics programme has been too fast for them, or the method used during the literature lessons have not tapped into a preferred learning style. And finally, vocabulary acquisition. Have they been exposed to good vocabulary? You have to know a word to be able to use a word and read a word. They need appropriate conversations, stories, and nursery rhymes. Vocabulary is the strongest prediction of reading. Poor vocabulary in P1 and the pupils will often struggle by primary 3. It's also indicative of their educational success and earnings at age 30. So a child who comes in with poor vocabulary, we really have to work to try and close that gap. In the next slide, it's all about promoting equity and supporting independent learners. But to do that, we need to understand particular areas of challenge for pupils. And this is where we're talking about matching the child's challenges with the support that they need. Somebody has asked within the chat about used coloured overlays because Kerry talked about changing the colour backgrounds on the iPads. What I will say is that Louise and I would still send out assessment packs to schools and we would still get staff to do the assessment using the overlay assessment, and then we'd suggest matching as near as possible the background colour to the iPad colour, the background colour to the overlay, sorry. However, what I would say is that because all children have access to this now, you know, any child can change their background colour. The way to know it's working is simply if they're still using it 2 weeks later, then it's helping. If they are changing it every day, then it's not really having an effect on what they're reading. So some of the particular areas of challenge for children can be things like processing. So where it's auditory and processes a range of information. Learning depends on how efficiently and effectively children process that information. So with a processing difficulty, pupils take on information through a system that appears to work really well. So the pupil can see perfectly well, they'll probably pass an eye test, but the information gets muddled on its way into the brain. This will look to you, you'll see letters getting muddled or missed out. And the difficulty is only with letters and words. If the child will still see pictures perfectly. With auditory processing, again, the information which is heard gets muzzled or missed, even though the child has good hearing. So again, this is why it's really important that children can hear and see the words in front of them. They can change the layout of the words. You know, they can have a line at a time, 2 lines at a time, whatever suits their visual or auditory needs. Phonological awareness, this is the ability to identify and manipulate the sounds of language. Poor phonological awareness will impact on the child's ability to read and spell accurately. It's one of the foundations of literacy which needs to be in place to make good progress. Oral language skills, if a child doesn't have the oral language skills that their peer has, for example, the EAL child, their progress in literacy will be affected. Memory also plays a really important part in this. I have teachers who come to me and say, you know, we've done all these sounds, but he's just not retaining them, or we've done the sight words, but he's not retaining them. And I'll often say at that time, actually, maybe what we need to look at is his memory and his processing of information. So your short-term memory is the ability to retain information for a short period of time. So that could be visually, as in copying information from the board, or auditory when remembering a sequence of letters, words, or instructions. The working memory is the ability to do something meaningful with the information stored in short-term memory. So, for instance, carrying out a mental maths calculation. And pupils with weak memory may struggle to make processing literacy because they simply can't retain the information they need. Finally, sequencing and directionality. Some pupils have difficulty with sequencing, which would clearly have an impact on all aspects of literacy, and some have difficulty with directionality, so it's knowing where to start reading on a page. In the next slide, we'll look at the elements of reading. We used a balanced approach to reading in Falkirk Council, and in fact mostly across Scotland, which is a mixture of phonics and the whole word approach to try to meet the needs of all learners. However, there are 5 key elements which pupils need to master to read fluently. So these are, as I've already said, the phonological awareness. So it's just about being able to hear the sounds within words. The teaching of phonics, we need to have a systematic approach to teaching phonics, and it's more beneficial over experiential approaches, which is as and when they're encountered. However, no one single approach to the teaching of phonics will meet the needs of every child. Different pupils will require different approaches, and we tell all our staff that they need to use a multisensory approach to teaching. Reading fluency, which we often take for granted, is the ability to read text automatically, without effort and with expression. And there's little conscious detail to the mechanics of reading, for example, decoding. I will meet a child who is decoding every word within the reading book, and what that means is they would lose the comprehension. The actual act of reading has just taken over the whole process, which is why a good sight vocabulary aids reading speed and fluency. The vocabulary development itself should be taught both directly, so we give them the words we want them to know, and indirectly as we encounter words in text. And as Kerry was already showing you, within Immersive Reader, we can, check for the meaning of words if a child comes to a word that they don't understand. We also need repetition and multiple exposures to assist in the development of vocabulary. It actually takes 12 educational exposures to a word before it becomes concrete in our brains. Comprehension doesn't just happen. We need to teach a variety of techniques and strategies to assist in the recall of information, question generation, and the summarising of information. I think, as Kerry said, we don't just want them to cut and paste the whole time. We actually want them to share what they've learned with us. So within these 5 components, when any of these becomes impaired, it will affect a pupil's ability to read, comprehend, and use information in text. So if we take that a wee bit further in the next slide, digital tools. As I said, digital tools can help support pupils who find reading challenging to complete research tasks. This is important in primary schools as we encourage pupils to undertake independent research tasks, but it becomes imperative when pupils move to high school and they must undertake research which will make the difference between passing and failing exams. The ability to undertake their own research is important to becoming a valuable group member and should be reflective of age-appropriate practices. The ability to personalise setting also increases the chance of pupils being able to complete tasks independently. It's vitally important that wherever possible, pupils can use these supports independently for the transition to high school. When pupils feel that they can access age-appropriate tasks like their peers, then we see a rise in the self-esteem and confidence and a willingness to try new things. If we go on to the next slide, we're going to look at what experiences teachers have with their learners. But if anybody wants to put in the chat their own experiences of how they find it's helped their learners, that would be really good, just to share what people have been doing already. And if we move on to the next slide, these slides are messages from teachers who have used Immersive Reader and the impact that it's had on children. As a reader myself, I can't imagine a world without reading, and it can be heartbreaking to see children who cannot read when they realise they're not keeping up with their peers. And that can actually happen, in the infants. It doesn't always happen just to older pupils. We can use audiobooks to help pupils grow their vocabulary and their knowledge of stories, but what Immersive Reader does is it allows pupils to participate in class and group activities alongside their peers. It will also allow them to access text they may be interested in and can comprehend, but they just can't read it independently. Often children with reading difficulties have a higher comprehension level than their reading skill level, so we shouldn't limit them to books primarily at their skill level. Now, I know Kerry was going to talk to you about split screens in the next slide, but I also realise that you've touched on that already, Kerry.
Yeah, but I think this is a really good example just of seeing it in action. I mean, it's something, sorry, Jude, I'm pure like jumping in on your bit.
No,
But
no,
this
this is yours.
that we see in action a lot in school, particularly in primary 6 and primary 7, where they've got their one-to-one devices. Nearly every class that I've been in the past sort of year, I've seen children using this. And it's just, and I think that's probably what you're going to say, Jude, like it's just reducing the amount of time spent flicking between one app and the other. So the reading, they can read something that's meaningful, and then they can make the note on the other side of the screen without having to do a whole lot to get there. I think it's really super useful. I use it all the time. And the other thing that I didn't mention when I was talking about it was it also works if you play video. So if you play video on one side, they could be making notes on the other side or recording that information on the other side of the split screen.
And I think that's what the next two slides are going to show. It's just that ability for children to be able to work on the recount. They can revisit things that they've wanted to look at. They can look at details that they want to know that they're going to put into their stories. And it's just a lovely way for children to be able to go back and look at things and, you know, actually even in partner exercises to discuss what it is that they want to use. So it's a really good tool, and again, such an age appropriate tool. I know I keep coming back to this, but it is really important for some children when they're note taking, especially in front of their peers. Handwriting and things become problematic. So this is a really good way for them to be able to research, but still use all the tools that Kerry has said to make that information available to children. And it's age appropriate information. You know, they're not having to look at books, only the books that they can read. This is about keeping it age appropriate. So, and the next slide, Kerry.
I think as well, just before we go to the next slide, it helps with that recall thing, doesn't it? Like if
Yes.
you don't have to remember the information and then go down into the other app, open the other app, and then get the information in, it's seamless in terms of the recall, which is really useful.
So we are, just lost my place for a minute there, sorry about that. Kerry, could you go on to the next slide for me?
Yep.
Thank you very much. There we go. So immersive reader is really important at filling the gap between pupils who have acquired the skill of reading but struggle with the vocabulary and the length of age-appropriate text. It's often highlighted for the transition to high school, where we understand that the volume of text may be overwhelming for some readers. So we understand that for some children, they've learned to read, but actually they still can't access the text that they actually want to read. We must realise as well that reading happens across the curriculum. Therefore, the pupil may need help in reading number problems or chemistry questions. And I think what's important is this really gives them a chance to actually access homework as well for the child who's really struggled to be able to do their homework. I also say it's a great way to share things with their parents as well. For us, dyslexia often runs in the family, and I think this is a great way that they can actually share their learning with their parents as well. So on the next screen, quite often by the time Louise and I are meeting pupils, especially in the upper primaries, but sometimes as low as primary 3, they've started to know that they're different from their peers and are feeling inadequate due to their difficulties with reading, but actually across all areas of literacy. There's nothing worse for a pupil than having a younger sibling who's overtaken them on the same reading scheme or been asked to read in front of peers when they're unable to decode words. Immersive reader gives them the chance to be independent, gather their own thoughts and opinions through their research, and feel confident in their work. Self-esteem and self-worth are without doubt some of the strongest motivators that we can give children. Continuing with that on the next screen, as we become more accustomed to using Office Lens and Immersive Reader, we've begun to extend the way we can use these tools. I remember when they first came in and we were all like, oh, this will be interesting. Struggle with their auditory processing, who find it hard to follow instructions or listen for information. These pupils can take pictures of instructions, they can listen to them as a task progresses, or use them to take pictures of notes and presentations that are given by subject teachers in high school, which they can use for revision. On the next page. Thank you. I think we all know that pupils like to emulate their teachers. It's important that they see us using these tools in everyday tasks. And I know personally from talking to peers and managers that this is becoming a preferred way to read over policy documents and many of those other miscellaneous pieces of paper which teacher gathers. So in conclusion, on the last slide that I have, thank you. Writing is a complex process for pupils, from thinking of an idea to thinking of setting and characters and plots. They must then think of the order to tell the story before thinking of how to write the sentences, spell the words and punctuate the sentences. Some pupils may struggle to read their own handwriting, so ask them to read over the work is challenging. This gives pupils the chance to hear what they've written and edit it before they need to share it with anyone. They may also not use all of the vocabulary they know as they can't spell the words. So this allows them to produce the best work they can. And it's always worth bearing in mind that it can be a benefit to all pupils, not just those finding reading challenging, especially those kids who don't like to read over the work to ensure that it makes sense. So I am going to hand you back.
Oh, I think we just lost you at the end there. I think you were handing back to me though, Jude. So I'm just going to jump in. Person that doesn't like to read over their work, that's me. Like I always use Speak Selection to read back over stuff that I've written. Because as you know, when you're reading back over something, you read what you think you've wrote and not what you've actually written. So it's really useful for that, and I do use that all the time. Moving on then, hopefully we'll have time to cover these in the 20 minutes that we've got left, so I might have to go quite speedy. But these are some other tools that I wanted to sort of shout out. I think they were worthy of mentioning when we're talking about reading digitally. So you can see around Macy here, we've got a bunch of different things. We've got Storyline Online, BorrowBox, Microsoft Reading Progress, Books, and Narratopia. So these do a range of different things. We're not really following the theme anymore of Macy doing our Frida Kahlo research. We're just kind of onto general tools that might be useful for reading. So I'm going to start with BorrowBox. Now, unfortunately, this really is a message that's only for Falkirk Council people, because I don't know what the status of BorrowBox is in other local authorities. Sorry, but certainly BorrowBox is something that has been paid for by our Learning Resource Service, and it's something that is available to all Falkirk Council children, and they can use it to access audiobooks and ebooks using their Glow username and password. So I'm really hoping that you have all seen this and nobody is like seeing this for the first time, because there's been a big push on this for several years now. But if I go into BorrowBox, you will see that hopefully it's not going to ask me to log in again. It's hopefully already going to, yep, keep me logged in. I've already got 2 loans out. And you can see here that if I tap on audiobooks at the bottom, I have a range of different audiobooks that are available to me. And I have a range of different ebooks, if I tap on ebooks, that are available to me. If I just go into my loans, and if I just open this one here, you can see that when we read in BorrowBox, we can still use those tools that we're talking about, the speak selection. If I just tap on the word tiny, increase it to little, I've got that little pop-up that will speak that to me if I want it read to me. So that is the functionality that we've already talked about for spoken content is available in BorrowBox. But if you've not used BorrowBox with your class or with your children before, or your young people, it's worth having a look. It's their Glow username and password. And just to keep you right, because this confuses me every single time I log in, it's their entire Glow username. So their GW number, surname, first name, at Glow, So they need the full thing. There is guidance available on how to log in. If you haven't done so already, please get in touch if you need me to send you that guidance. The next one then on this lovely list that we're going to look at is Books. Books is an often overlooked app that comes built in to all iPads as standards, and it's the built-in e-reader. So if you've got, and I wouldn't like to speculate on how you maybe got your hands on certain PDFs or EPUBs of books, but if you have got access to the EPUB or a PDF version of a class text, then children can use their iPad to read PDFs and EPUBs on their iPad in a way that's kind of more streamlined than just reading it as a sort of PDF document. So if I go into books, I'll open it up. It's the orange app with a book on it. And you can see that I have a number of different books on here already. These are PDFs or EPUBs that I have access to. And I can just tap on the book that I want to read, and you'll see that it provides quite a sort of seamless reading experience. It reads it kind of similar to BorrowBox. You'll notice that the animations that were originally in the EPUB when it was made are still active and live. This is actually a book that was written by children at West Quarter Primary School. So good to know that if you do have the ability to publish EPUBs, which you do on Pages, and we'll cover that more in the next session of this series, which is about the creation of texts. If you can publish books, then other children in other classes can read these books in books the same way that they would be able to read a book in BorrowBox, or they'd be able to read a book in any of your other e-readers. So if you've not encountered books before, really, really useful to know that it's there. And as I say, you can put in any EPUBs or any PDFs that you have. The easiest way to do that is to airdrop them to your device, and it will come up with a big list of how do you want to open, and you would just choose books and it would automatically open it in books. The next one then that I'm going to tell you about is Storyline Online. And this is kind of moving to the two, Storyline Online and Narratopia, that are more about finding texts for children to engage with. So for both of these websites, and they're both websites, so you need a browser, you can just go into the website and access the stuff. The children don't need a login, you don't need a login. It's just sites where you can access different types of stories. So I'm going to start with Storyline Online. If I go into my internet browser, I should have it open here. There we go. I'll just go back to the first page that you land on. And you can see here that we have lots of different titles. And what is on here is, I guess, a range of professionally produced video content, usually with a celebrity reading the story. And what I think is quite good about it is if I just tap on Being Frank, you'll see here it automatically gives me the video. If I start to play the video, you'll see, I'll just make sure the volume's right down, that it's all closed captioned. Again, it's quite professional looking. You've got, you know, some of the illustrations from the book that have been animated, and then it kind of cuts between the person, the famous person. You probably recognise this guy from Breaking Bad, the famous person who's narrating it, along with the images, kind of similar to the BBC bedtime stories stuff that you've maybe seen before in class or with your own children. One thing that I really like about it is, if I just pause that just now, underneath the video, you can see that there's a teacher's guide. So if I tap on teacher's guide, you'll see that for almost all the stories, there is a teacher's guide that kind of breaks down things like the synopsis, the themes. It gives you instructions of like things that you can do before and after viewing. It's got like activities and stuff that relate to the story. So if you wanted to turn that story into a text that you're doing with a whole class, that's something that's available for you. In terms of sharing this with young people, of course, you can just share the link. So you would just go up here and you can either copy and paste that into Teams or Google Classroom or whatever, or you could hit that share button that we love talking about so much, and we could airdrop the link to children and it would open up the website on the exact page that you've asked them to look at. So that's Storyline Online. And then the other one is Narratopia. So again, I'll just go back to the homepage of Narratopia. This one is quite similar. It's just a place to find stories. But what I quite like about this is you can see across the top there that we can actually filter the content. So if I tap on age, I can choose like 6 to 7 year olds. If I tap on time, I can choose how long it should take them to read it or how long it should take me to read it to them. So if I choose short, I can choose characters, whether we want animals, mythical creatures, whatever. I can choose emotions, which I think is quite interesting. So particular emotions. I can choose a genre. I can choose different topics. So actually, let's just go into topics and let's choose veggie. So here's now a story that we've got for 6 to 7 year olds that should only take a wee while to read. Well, it's actually giving me 22 minutes. If I tap on the story, what you'll see is it just gives me the story here in the browser, and it'll be loading, photographs that go with it. So it's almost like a book, but online. And I'm sure we'd be able to use our AA show reader view to get an even more seamless experience of reading. And again, I can still use my speak selection function if I wanted to or if I needed to, but that's something there that if you're ever kind of trying to find stories and stuff, just because we like children to read stories, we know that we've got books in schools, but sometimes those books can be limited, or our access to the library or spaces that books are in schools can be limited. You actually have access to a lot of stories and a lot of readable content on your iPad. So that one was Narratopia. Now, I'm very quickly going to attempt to show you something that probably deserves maybe even a session of its own, but it's Microsoft Reading Progress. Now, this is something that's been around for a wee while now. It was a bit janky at first, but to be honest, it's much, much better than it used to be. And it's certainly something that I would be looking at using if I was still in class with my sort of BGE classes in terms of reading. So this is something that you can actually get in a number of different places. It's a little bit confusing because sometimes it's called Reading Coach, sometimes it's called Reading Progress. But ultimately, what it does is it allows children to practice reading out loud, and it will give them feedback on their reading. So I'm very quickly just going to show you in Teams, and then we'll go back in at the end and look at it in OneNote, which was the thing that I said I would come back to at the end. So if I go into my Teams, and I'll just make sure I'm on I've got a wee team here, Miss A's test class. If I wanted to set a reading progress assignment for all of my class in Teams, I would just I would make sure I'm on apps, and I would tap on assignments. And you'll see here that I've already got one on the go, but we'll come back to that in a minute. In the bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to tap on plus, and I'm going to tap on new assignment. And what it's going to do is it's going to ask me, obviously, to make a title. So I'll just call this Reading Practice. And what I'm looking for is the button that's got a little rocket ship and it says Learning Accelerators. If I tap on Learning Accelerators, you'll see that I have the choice of Reading Progress. And if I tap on Reading Progress, it's going to ask me what I want them to read. So I can import a Word file or a PDF. I can generate a passage using AI, which is what we're going to do, or I can browse a sample, a library of samples. I'm going to use this Generate Passage option. And you'll see what it allows me to do is make some specifications about what I want the passage to be. So for a topic, let's choose space. We can choose the age of the children. So let's go 8. We can choose how long we want the passage to be. So we'll just go 100 to 200 words. And crucially, we'll change the language to English United Kingdom. And what you can see underneath with challenging words is because I've already set a reading progress assignment before, and the child that completed it, because it's just a test one, said that pictures was a difficult word for them. It asks me if I want to include those words that have been challenging for my learners before. So I'm going to keep pictures in, and I'm going to tap on Generate Reading Passage. And it's going to take a little second, but AI, as you can see, is doing its magic and it's generating a short passage for me. Now, once it generates it, I can change it. If I don't like it, I can go in and move things about, etc., etc. But there we go. There's a customized passage that I can set my children to read. You can see at the bottom that I can change the complexity. So I'm not going to do it just now, but if I did tap the up or the down button, I could make the complexity slightly less, or I could increase the complexity. I'm just going to tap on Use Passage. And you'll see that we now have on the right-hand side further options that we need to set. So I can choose the reading level. So if I have a particular reading level system that I use, I can add these in as custom tags, and then when I click on or tap on, say, pink, it's going to take me to all the pink level assignments and all the pink level readers, etc., etc. I can choose the genre. I can tell the children how many attempts they're allowed to have. So it might be that they can have unlimited tries of doing this, or maybe I only want them to do it once and I just want the first time try, or 10 tries, or whatever it is. I can set them a time limit for reading it, which might be useful. I can also change the pronunciation sensitivity, and perhaps for a Scottish accent, it might be good to go with less sensitive, but that'll be up to you when you've tested it out a few times. You can also see that I have the choice down here to add comprehension. So I can actually tap on that and it'll allow me to add in comprehension questions for this passage that are added to the experience of reading progress, but I'm not going to do that just now. I'm just going to close that off. And you can see that I can choose whether the children need to require a video. So I actually would be switching this off because I didn't really want to see a video of them. An audio recording is absolutely fine for me. So once I've set all those to what I want, I'm going to tap next in the top right, and you will see that it sets it as an assignment. So I can choose the date, time, etc., etc. And then all I need to do is tap on assign, and that will be sent out to all of the children, and they'll have until the time that that assignment is due to complete that. Now, looking at this from a child's point of view, if I go into my photos, I should have a video of what the child sees. So if I just start this, there's no sound, but if I just start this just now, you'll see that the child goes in, they open up the assignment, they can turn their camera on or off, but if we've turned it off, then it's always off. It counts them down, they see the passage, and they begin to read. And you can see it says recording at the top. So it's recording what they're saying. They've still got that double A button where they can, as Jude said, it's really important for them to be able to customize the font size, etc., etc. But they're going to read that passage out loud, and they just scroll up and down to get more of the passage if it's a longer one. And when they're finished, it's obviously taken me quite a long time to read this in the video, but when they're finished, they have I'm done. It lets them look at the recording or listen to the recording, see if they're happy with it, and they can just tap on use recording. It will attach it to the assignment, and then that is uploaded, and they just have to tap hand in. First of all, it goes through the reading coach, so it tells them things that maybe they didn't quite get right. Do they want to practice these words again? And it just gives them that extra chance to just revisit some of those words and have a little practice. And this is where the pronunciation sensitivity really comes into it. So you can see I've gone through a couple of words. I have the option to add the picture dictionary as well, just in case. But when they get to this point, they can just tap hand in, and it will be handed in. It's in the top right-hand corner. It gives them a wee celebration when they hand it in. Now, as the teacher, if I go back to that specific assignment, I will be able to see what my student did. So in this assignment, I've got 1 of 1 handed in, and it's this fake pupil that we've got, Chimamanda. If I tap on hers, you'll see what it gives me is really interesting. So it gives me the recording of the child, and it would give me the video if I had a video. It tells me how many correct words per minute, how many words they practiced. It tells me their accuracy rate, but it gives me a colour coding. So you can see here that when I read it, I mispronounced the word pictures. I also missed out all of the pink words. If I had any repetitions, it would be a different colour. If I had inserted other words that weren't originally in the passage, it would be in there. And also if I self-corrected. And the other thing that we can do at the top is we can check for expression. So we can see that I had a 0% monotone score. So I've obviously got a very expressive voice. But you can see that I've also got places where I've maybe had an extended pause between words. That seems to be the main thing that I've done. I've also got a rushed reading there after United States. So it gives me a real visual breakdown actually of how the children have performed in that reading that reading physical reading out loud sort of performance. And I can give feedback to the child and all that sort of stuff on the right, like I can with any kind of assignment. Just very, very quickly, because I know time is getting on. If that's not your bag and you don't want to set it as an assignment, you can, or they can access this in OneNote. So we were already in OneNote for our immersive reader. I'm telling you, OneNote is the place to be. An immersive reader with this Frida Kahlo passage. Tap on the book, tap on reading coach, and then when I go back in, you will see that I can press on play. It's going to ask me if I want to use my microphone. Obviously, I would allow it. And it's the exact same thing. I can start reading. It's going to count me down. It's going to give me the feedback of what it is that I have done. And it'll give me how long I've spent reading, words to practice, how many correct words per minute. And then it allows me to go and practice those words as well. So it's really useful to know that that's there. It's maybe going to take a wee bit to integrate it into your classroom, but I definitely think it's a valuable tool to know about. And I think before I looked at it, I thought it was maybe quite complicated to use, but it's actually quite easy to use. If you're already using Teams with your class, it's super easy to integrate as a homework task or as a task that takes place during class. So I'm going to move us on just very quickly. Just to the last thing that we always like to ask at the end of these sessions. And what we like to say is that change happens one step at a time. It just takes one small action to start a huge wave of change. What we would like to ask you in the chat is, what's the one thing, just one thing that you've seen of all the stuff that we've showed you today? What's the one thing that you might try tomorrow, next week, after the Christmas break? We'll give you a little minute just to type your thoughts into the chat and see what it is that people have really sort of taken away from this session. Anna, I'll answer your question in the chat just now while people are typing. I'm aware there's lots of information. We are recording the session, so we'll make sure that that's put up online and we'll get that information to you. So I'm going to stop sharing just now. No, I'm not going to stop sharing just now. I'm going to read through the chat. So what have we got? Loads of votes for immersive reader, split screen. Split screen's an easy win that you can do tomorrow. I think that's a really, really good one. The speaking function in immersive reader to be able to highlight different passages, I think is good. Yeah. Speak selection. Rachel, I also love reading progress. I just wish that I had a class that I could actually practice it with. I'm just going to make sure that Yvonne and Jude aren't like stuck on mute, because that happened last time.
I'm here.
I'm here. I can actually see you now.
Oh, hey.
Reader view on websites is coming up. Yep. The show reader function, digitizing a physical book, digitizing worksheets. This is all great stuff to hear. Colour overlays. I think especially if you've already got someone who benefits from a coloured overlay, that's an easy one that you could do tomorrow. Looks like we'll be seeing a lot of split screen, hopefully, on Twitter. And on that note, talking about Twitter, we really love to see how you use the things that we've mentioned in today's session. So if you are someone who uses Twitter or X or Twix or whatever we're calling it now, you know, we'd love to celebrate your successes with you. And if you do use any of these tools, we'd love to hear from you. So you can drop us a wee tag at Falkirk Literacy or DigiLearnFalk and show us how your young people get on with some of these tools. But that does take us over time by 2 minutes. I'm so sorry, that's incredibly rude. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just say a big thank you to everybody for attending. As we've already said, the session will be recorded. We'll put it up with some other materials. It might take a wee couple of weeks maybe to get that all sorted, but we'll get it to you. If you have any specific questions, you can hang on and ask us in the chat, or you can put your hand up and we'll unmute you. But a huge thank you from us, and enjoy the rest of your evening, folks.
Thank you. Thank you again.